I wanted to tell two stories today, but I'm going to tell one. And if you join us in the 12:30 workshop, I'll tell the other one. And we're going to talk about what they have to do with each other. But the one I want to start with is a story I've certainly told before. And it's a Buddhist story. And it's a very interesting story in the context of forgiveness. It's a story that takes place a long time ago and far, far away. Very good. Everyone's paying attention still. And they say that this was a true story. They say this happened in a time some centuries after the Buddha had passed and temples had spread across Southeastern Asia. And it was also the time of barbarians and hordes and terrorizing warlords that were storming the countryside and trying to dismantle this growing tradition, trying to replant and reinvigorate the seeds of fear and terror. They say that in particular that there was one warlord who was so awful, so terrible, that people fled before he could even reach their villages because they knew that nothing good could possibly come of this encounter, that there would be no negotiation, that not only could there be no resolution or peace, but that people would be tortured and nothing but a wake of destruction would be left in the process. Well, he continued his campaign, destroying temple after temple, raiding village after village, taking what he wanted, destroying what he didn't, until he set his next sights on a little Buddhist monastery at the low edge of a mountain. And word traveled to that little Buddhist monastery where there was a legendary monk who was the abbot of the monastery, a man who they said was beyond compassionate, beyond awakened, that understood all things in fullness. And so people sent word to protect this man, to protect this treasure of wisdom. And the word came, you must flee, you must run, you have to get out of this temple, hide in the mountains, because nothing good will come of this. The abbot, the wise monk, said, I have no fear. Let him come. And the people were confused, and the monks were confused, and they're like, I don't think you understand. This is not a negotiation. This is not a force to be reckoned with. We need you. We need your wisdom. We need your peace. You need to get to safety. And he said, I am safe. I'm always safe, just like you. Well, that sounded good, but you know how it feels when people say things like that, and you're in terror and fear, and so everyone ran. Even some of the monks fled and went to hide in caves in the mountains. Very few stayed behind their master, their leader, and they waited. They went about their daily affairs, their meditations, their prayers and blessings, until one day they could hear, like thunder, hooves coming up the mountain path, storming to the monastery gate, and then a pounding on the door, and a howling and calling of terrible voices. And then it grew quiet as one pounding fist remained. And the abbot got up from his morning meditation, and he walked quietly to the front door, and he opened it, and there he saw this terrible gang of bloodthirsty warriors, and in front, the warlord himself, with blood-stained armor and sword drawn. And the warlord looked at this abbot, who stood quietly, with a little smile on his face, greeted him. He was puzzled. The warlord looked at him and said, "Don't you know who I am?" I could run this sword right through your belly without even blinking. And the monk smiled and said, and don't you know who I am? I could allow you to run your sword right through my belly without even blinking. And the warlord looked long into the loving eyes of the monk. And he resheathed his sword and signaled his men, and they left. And this is a story that I think teaches us so much about the divine understanding, the transcendent understanding of forgiveness. Because the struggle in life, as we have often talked about here, is this trinity within us, these three dimensions of who we think we are or try to be or struggle with. The human dimension that just sees all the gains and losses and counts me versus you, the competition, the comparison, the home of the ego, the home of the emotions. But then we have this other side to who we are, a deeper side, a wiser side, a richer side, a more understanding side. We can call that the divine self. And we all have that. It's not always active. It's not always engaged, but it's there. And when we need it most, it knows what loving is. It knows what generosity is. It knows what peace and patience is. This is the home of our innate wisdom and our ability to do good in a difficult world. This is the home of forgiveness. But there's that other dimension to who we are, remember? The transcendent, what some of us call the non-dual. The part of ourself that is not even ourself, the part of ourself that is everyone and everything. The perpetrator and the victim, the judge and the jury, the crime and the healing, the wound and the medicine, all of it in one. And when we realize that place, when we identify with that place, when we live from that place, we are as this monk in the story, the abbot, who saw nothing to forgive, who saw no one to be angry at, no one to be fearful of. Just passing phenomena of consciousness. Right now, I'm going to pretend to be a monk. You're going to pretend to be a warlord. And then we're going to pass in a couple of years or a couple of decades. And what does it matter? It's just a handful of dust in the wind. And maybe we're going to cycle back around. And then I'll be the warlord and you can be the monk. And then we'll chase each other around the castle. And then that will be over too. And then maybe I'll come back as a mango or a donkey, or I'll move on to other dimensions not even dreamed of. But what we know for certain is that this world, this drama, this battle is a passing illusion. It's painful and feels very real, but the trickiness is when we feed it as real, what happens? It just gets worse. And we get more engaged and more hurt and more angry. And the strange magic of it all is that when we find the courage to just let go and trust that it's okay that there is war, there is violence, there is pain, there is sickness and loss, when we accept it with the heart of oneness, we actually become empowered to clearly do something about it. Instead of wringing our hands in worry and despair, what will we do? We not only become the consciousness of the solution, but we acquire the resilience and the clarity that can end all problems, all puzzles, because we can work through anything. We have endurance, we have patience, we have grace. And forgiveness, it's not even a question. So this is something worth thinking about as you explore the topics of forgiveness in your life. Where do you approach it from? The human side that's counting who did what to who and when? The divine side that seeks to be benevolent and greater? Or that transcendent side that is humbled? Make no mistake, sad and heartbroken, but continues to say yes to life, to change, and to drawing from our essence to bring healing to all. So I said that we would finish with something to take home, in case you're still convinced you're human. 5 frequently forgotten forgiveness factors. Let's put that on a t-shirt or something. The first is to remember that forgiveness is a choice. If you're sitting here and listening and a part of you is saying, yeah, that sounds nice on a Sunday, but you got to face what I'm facing. You should try to heal what I'm healing. I don't feel like forgiving. And to that I would say, well, of course you don't. That's why the topic of forgiveness is on your mind. No one feels like forgiving. You've been hurt. You've been wronged. Something's unfair. Something's not right. Of course you don't feel like it. But if you wait till you feel like forgiving, you could wait a long time. In fact, you might never feel it at all. So you can begin it as a process, as a choice, as something that you're willing to move towards. Why? Because you want to live in a world that is free. You want to live in a mind and a heart that is free. Because that's the second forgotten factor, which is to forgive enables you to see more clearly. We often confuse the unwillingness to forgive with the experience of hurt, which is actually the third forgotten factor. But let's hang on a second. We're talking about seeing clearly. When we're in our anger or judgment or pain or whatever has arisen because of the hurt, we can't see clearly. We can't see the whole story. We can't even see our own whole story. And forgiveness begins to not just set us free, but to clear our vision so that we can make choices more powerful, more healing, more authentic. And this is where we get to the third of the frequently forgotten factors, which is that the opposite of forgiveness is not hurt. And we were in a group this week, our relationship class, and this was a really significant topic for a lot of people. When you start to forgive, it doesn't mean hurt will just go away. You can forgive someone and still feel hurt. In fact, I would say, when you forgive someone, you're still going to feel hurt. What you're releasing when you forgive is the desire for retribution, the energy of anger, the feeling of judgment, the confusion of the mind. Those are the things you're releasing. But if you were hurt, well, that's a different process. Hurt has its own life, its own cycle, and forgiveness another. Begin to forgive so you have your energy to heal the hurt that may still linger. The last two, I think, are interesting because I don't think we talk about them a lot, but I think they're implicit in the struggle with forgiveness. The first is that shame is typically at the heart of our struggle. Our struggle to choose to forgive, our struggle to see clearly, and our struggle to begin to heal the hurt. Because if we need to forgive something, it typically means something has been done to us, against us, or around us in a way that hurts us, often to the very core. And when we are hurt in the very core, too often we internalize that as somehow reflecting the quality of who we are. Did I deserve that? Did I allow that? Did I participate in that? Why didn't I see it coming? Why didn't I do more or differently? And all that self-judgment, the lack of self-forgiveness mounts. And in that shame, we hide and we fail to choose to begin. But the last one is the fact that we often don't talk about a bigger problem at the heart of forgiveness, which is the pain of living in a world that is unfair. Where's that conversation? Angry at God, angry at society, angry at our politicians, angry at our parents. There's a lot going on that is just not right. But you know, that shame works, so we try to own it. We try to heal it, and we try to talk about it rather than simply acknowledging at some level that we need to forgive the world as well. For tens of thousands of years, we have recorded the history of great triumph, great wisdom, and great despair, great disappointment, great suffering. And that is a difficult step to take on the path of spiritual maturity, that we can affirm that God is all things. God is one. God is the substance and source and energy that is everything. And yes, in that great design, terrible, horrible things happen, and pain arises. But then we have choice. Then we have the path that allows us to transform it. And maybe one day, a small group of people like us, a simple person like me or like you, can begin to make a change in a way that has never happened before. And if there was ever a time in history where a small group of people could have a greater influence, it's now. It begins with forgiveness. It begins with a choice. So I invite you to close your eyes for a moment and just hold these thoughts, hold these feelings. Who is it that you long to forgive? Where is it you get stuck? Can you embrace a world that is as beautiful as it is painful? What will your choice be today? How will you begin that movement so that healing can begin?